Lucas will have a chance to introduce himself in a bit. And as always, we have Edgar with us, who is our moderator. Welcome once again. Thanks for being here. If you have any questions, if you have any comment, anything you want to say, just raise your hand, or you can leave your comments on the chat section. We will be taking them from there. All right, welcome, and over to you, Ed.
Thank you, Gabby. Yeah, so definitely we have been talking about Gen AI on and off on the show, and the big question remains, right? How can we jump from a proof of concept to an actual project, and what does that mean for the companies that are implementing the technology? So for that, we have a good round of questions prepared for Lucas. Lucas, thank you. Welcome to the show. But before that, of course, we want to hear a bit more about your background, and please tell us a bit more about yourself as well, and we can get started from there. So thank you, and over to you, Lucas.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, first of all, I'm honored to be here. Thanks for the invitation. It's always good to have a forum where we can discuss the importance of technology, the impact of technology, etc. So I'm happy to be part of this conversation. I need to do a quick disclaimer because I work for a consulting company, so I want to make sure that everything that I share is my personal view and has nothing to do with the company that I work for. So just to be clear, it needs to be in the records. My background. So I'm a data and AI consulting director with a large experience with AI, most focusing on computer vision and generative AI most recently. I was a solution architect for over 8 years. I still do solution architecting as part of the consulting company that I work for, but more now focused on building the team that will deliver AI and generative AI to our clients. Before joining the company I work for, I was a long time working with CPGs, with consumer packaged goods, as a solution architect and as part of the corporate innovation team at Kimberly-Clark and then at Nestle for years. During that time, I was exposed to many emerging technologies, and those emerging technologies helped me learn how to be resilient, because most of the times what you learn is in a few weeks it's over, right? It's not a truth anymore, it's not a fact anymore. So I learned to be resilient, and I learned to be constantly searching and researching, and having those conversations as well. So again, thanks for having me here.
Amazing. To be honest, I also had the opportunity to go over your website, right? And I saw that you even have a certification for SAP, right?
Yes, a long time ago. Yeah, SAP. I was a SAP consultant for a year, and I had the order to cash. I don't even know if the certification is the same anymore. That is the same name, but I had the opportunity to go to the SAP certification for order to cash, and worked on it for a while.
Right. I brought that up because in the end we are also into the SAP space. There's a lot going on the AI side, I guess, pretty much everywhere, right? But there are some interesting tools in there. But okay, let me get back to something that you mentioned, and that is how, as you are learning about new technologies and really having this, I would say, privileged position, right? Of innovating and getting to know new technologies, you managed to create some resilience, right? And also, I wanted to ask you, how is it for you to manage, a little bit the uncertainty in your roles? Because at the same time as you are, learning from technologies and how to apply them, it is also true that whenever you are exploring new things, you don't really know where they will take you or if they are going to take you anywhere, right? So how is it for you when you're exploring these new technologies, and how do you cope with that uncertainty?
With this uncertainty? That's a great question. I think there are two things I notice that happens with any emerging technology. One is that it comes from something that came before, right? Like it's a stepping stone. So it's an emerging technology, but it's on top of something that was created before. This means
Mm-hmm.
that technology that came before already gave us an opportunity to learn what are the governance constraints, concerns, you know, frameworks, etc., that we should always carry with us to assess the usage of emerging technology. So you can learn from the past to apply to the unknown, right? So that's, I think, one big aspect
Mm-hmm.
of working with emerging technology. The other one is that you have to understand that you won't know everything, because sometimes, you know, or we are all technologists here, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
and we like to deep dive into a specific technology, and we like to wear the t-shirt and use a specific technology stack, and feel that you are part of a group, an identity, right? Create an identity
Mm-hmm.
around it. Um, but the thing is that you can't do that with emerging technology, because that can change. So you learn to um, navigate the fact that you won't know. Just you will understand that you will never know everything, and that things will change. So it requires resilience, as I said, and it requires patience, and also be careful to anyone out there that is, you know, exploring emerging technology frequently, to not get overwhelmed or to feel down or behind, because those feelings are true and they will happen. But
Mm-hmm.
it's important for you to learn to cope with them, right? And a few ways you can do that is, first, accept that this is something that happens with emerging technology. You won't know everything. Second, make sure that any statements and comments and any guidance that you give is based on facts. Uh, One thing I do frequently that some people like it, some people get tired of it, but I like to always provide the sources where I get the information from.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That's great.
Frequently when I'm in meetings, and you know, because you don't come up with things, right? You are reading
Mm-hmm.
documentation, you are listening to podcasts or conversations like this one, so you can always reference where your thoughts are coming from. And I know it takes time. I know it's sometimes a little counterproductive, but it is necessary when you navigate to you know, unknowns. So it's always important to bring that up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think you are very right there, and actually, at the same time, I think it's a way to, recognize, right, the work that somebody else is doing, because you are also bringing them some exposure by
Exactly.
doing that. So I think it's great, and also, you let other people follow the same path that you're following, and then pretty much you can be at the same stage, have interesting conversations with them, and all based on that precisely that knowledge base, right? That you are
Exactly.
sharing. So I think that's a great way of doing it. And I'm curious about how is it to, or what brought you to, in particular, Gen AI and the AI trends. Since you were doing computer vision, I assume that you were doing that probably before ChatGPT and all of those things were in place.
Right.
Um, because all the hype that we got with GPT and all the LLMs, right? really creating all of this hype, and we're all excited and wanted to know more about that. But what brought you into the AI space, and what caught your attention about that particular space
Perfect,
that you
perfect.
wanted to explore?
About oh my God, 5 years ago or 6 years ago, I joined the Nestle Innovation Outpost in San Francisco. So it was
Mhm.
a program where you would apply to participate in what they call the Digital Acceleration Program, where you would work with them for a specific time frame. I think we call a mission in some companies, right? And I was
Mhm.
selected. I was happy to be selected to participate. And then at that time, computer vision was what Gen AI is today. So it was there were some big breakthroughs from Google, DeepMind, on computer vision, and there was all this
Mhm.
media covering how computer vision um, would be used to enhance productivity, to replace jobs, to um, basically make the next million or billion mark for a specific company. So at that time, that's how I got into it. I was a solution architect, and they needed technical folks in that group. And because of my technical background, they asked me to work with computer vision solutions. I had the chance to work with I say computer vision, but actually I worked with deep learning in general. So
Mhm.
one was based on we were working on something very interesting. Actually, it was a model. We wanted to train a model to recognize Nestle's machines, coffee machines. Because what
Mhm.
was happening? What was the problem? The problem was that consumers were getting in touch with the service desk, and they were asked a few questions to allow the chatbot, which was already a deep learning chatbot, to understand how to find the answers, or connect, identify the intent, and then write the person to the right uh, documentation, or to speak with a representative, etc. And one of the questions was, what machine model you have? So which coffee machine model you have? And this was a reason for 80% of the people to drop the chatbot, because they didn't know how to answer
Mhm.
that question.
Mhm.
And there were discussions about how can we make the model visible. The people responsible for the layouts were like, I'm not gonna put a label on top of my beautiful machine. So it's like it's
Mhm.
no way, right? So the one of the
Right.
options was to train a computer vision model to identify those
Mhm.
machines. So this was one. And then another one was with predictive maintenance,
Mhm.
using the airborne sounds of specific machines in the manufacturing. And so based
Oh,
on
wow.
the sound patterns, you could identify anomalies, and then you could flag that something is going on, and a message would be given to an expert, and then the expert would go there. So that was another interesting initiative. So that's how I
Okay.
started with AI.
All right. And for example, these projects that you are mentioning, perhaps they were pilots, or perhaps they got into production. But just, for a ballpark estimate, how long was the project? Was it like a big project? Did you guys have to develop everything from scratch, like the models and all of that? Or was it rather short? What kind of tools did you use? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. So first, the objective of the program was to perform proof of concepts, not to have solutions in production. However, the
Mhm.
proof of concepts would provide the baseline to build business cases for programs to be funded. Right. So that was the idea
Mhm.
behind the Innovation Outpost. So they were supposed to be 6 months proof of concepts at most. With deep learning, we all know, I mean, at least people that are involved on deep learning model training, they know that a considerable amount of data is required. It depends nowadays you have models like YOLO that can learn from a smaller amount of data, but in general, you need quality data and you need a lot of data. At that point in time we were speaking about like 5 to 10,000 images for a specific class. So this was a lot,
Wow.
and so this would require more time, right? So those proof of concepts were the one that I mentioned about the coffee machine. They were they took about 4 months, 4 or 5 months, and we developed we had two things to accomplish. One was how we can collect those images first, because Nestle only had data sets of images that were for marketing purposes. And those images, they didn't have the diversity we needed, because we ran a few tests to see if we would be able to train it and have enough um, accuracy and performance, but we identified that we needed more variances of images, so we needed real pictures. So what we did was one of the milestones was this, and the other one was to train the model itself, and then include that into a subset of users in the chatbot so they can test. For the first one, we had a creative idea of building a mobile app that would allow people to take pictures on the street or from their homes and submit them, so then we could compose the data sets. And to allow for a crowdsourcing of these images, we launched a campaign internally. It was an internal campaign. We gave them for the top three picture takers, let's say, they would receive a gift card. And so we ran that for 2 weeks, and we collected 3,000 images from that campaign, which was pretty cool to see. Even the idea of how to collect images was very interesting for the business case later. And now I believe they have that already in the chatbot. It was a Facebook chatbot. I don't recall if they still have this chatbot or not. But this was one. And then the technology we used to training, we were an Azure shop, so we were using Azure machine learning to perform the training. We used AutoML, and also after performing the baseline with AutoML, we would go for custom training. I think at that time we selected the ResNet 50 as the model to perform the inference.
Okay, that's very interesting. Now that you mentioned these tools, right? I guess we have seen that tools to train the models have evolved a lot lately, and there are a few tools that pretty much advertise that you can train a model super easily, like in really quick, right? Real quickly. So, in your experience, would these models be good models to use later in one project or one proof of concept, or do you think the approach of crafting your own models would be preferable overall while working with AI and machine learning?
Yeah, this is a common question I get actually. In my opinion, all the options are good. The services that those cloud providers or third-party software as a service solutions give, that you can use APIs to train models, they are pretty good. They are focused on common scenarios where if you need to identify common objects, they work pretty well. And I would say, I'm more familiarized with Azure, so I will share some of the Azure examples, but I don't have a preferable cloud, just to be clear here. But the Azure Vision, for instance, contains two sets of models that you can use right away. So the first one is pre-trained models that have the knowledge of specific images. Let's talk about computer vision images. So for object detection or image classification, segmentation, those are pre-trained models in common domain of expertise that can be used right away without any training. They do a good job with simple scenarios like identifying people, identifying cars. There is a set, if you go to the documentation, there is a list of objects that they can identify or images that they can classify or segment. But then so the approach is go for that first because it's an easy way to see if the domain that you are going to work with is already has already a pre-built solution or a pre-defined solution. Now you lose on a few you lose flexibility, you lose customizations. Because then you already have the service available, so you have to comply to their terms of services, you have to comply with their limitations on transactions, you have to know how much it will cost per transaction. So all these are relevant points that you have to be sure you have in mind when comparing that with the second option, which is to perform a customization of those pre-trained models. So Azure have Azure Vision, a custom vision that is a service for you to use APIs to train models. It is mostly the same models that they provision as is. You can also provide images or data sets that will be used for training. They help you with a simplistic labeling tool. So you have all this very easily without code that you can go ahead and use and test it. So next step would be for you to try those ones. And then if you see that the domain of the results are not enough or you need more flexibility on which machines will run the inference, which machines will run the training, if you want to have more control over the hyperparameters and weights and everything that is required for transfer learning, then you go all the way to the last step, which is setting up your own MLOps environment and performing the training using your preferable language, most probably Python, your preferable framework, depending on the type of model you want to train, PyTorch, TensorFlow, etc. And then collecting the right data set, because the other tools, they are adjusted to allow you to have less images, but with constraints, right? Because it are domains of expertise that are common. But once you realize that those tools can't help you, you have to make sure that your data is of quality, that your data is diverse, that your data is complete, and then you can perform the labeling, making sure that everything is in place to create those data sets, weight them. Anyways, I'm going too much details, but you have flexibility to do what you want. But this should be the third option, only in case the domain of expertise is. In the case of the example I gave about Nestle, you don't expect Azure to have a model that recognizes Azure Nestle coffee machine, right? So this is a very
Right.
specific domain of expertise. And this applies to Gen AI as well. So once we start speaking about Gen AI, this is the same concept.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And actually, since you mentioned Gen AI, right? And based out of your experience, the experience that you have accumulated in these recent years, what do you think would be like a quick win that a company could achieve with Gen AI?
You mean like a use case or
Yes, like a
impact?
simple use case maybe that pretty much every company could implement, or that
Yeah,
maybe depending on their industry could be helpful. Yeah.
let's just start with the basics because I think it's interesting for all of us to see what Gen AI means, right? So Gen AI
Sure.
relies on deep learning models. So it's same concept of computer vision, same concept of audio, computer audio, etc. And they are also often called foundational models. The reason is that they were trained in a vast amount of data with a lot of resources, and they understood patterns and relationships the same way that other traditional, now I call traditional models, were trained. The difference is on the task that they were trained on. So in the case of large language models, they were trained on the task of completing sentences. And during the process of reinforcement training or reinforcement learning, the outcome was to be the best uh, sentence completion to the understanding of the human that was reviewing the results, right? And providing feedback to the model, and the model adjusting the weights and etc. So it has clear limitations. And the reason I mentioned that is because we need to remember the fundamentals, so then we can go to the use cases and say, okay, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense, with responsibility, because they do have limitations, and those limitations need to be well understood. Now, there is a gap I see, and I will go back to your question pretty quickly, but it's an important
Sure.
topic. I see a gap, which is once those builders or model builders, for example, OpenAI, Mistral, other companies, Grok, etc. We see companies, Meta, uh, creating those models. They have a report, which is the model card. The model card is a summarization of the report and the articles that delineates all the limitations of those models, right? Sometimes they try to make it simpler by creating an article in one of their blogs where they explain what is, how good it is, how bad it is, what it's good for, what is bad for. But from that to enterprises, is a big gap. So people need, or we all need to understand, or at least people responsible for delivering, like I am, need to understand those reports, those limitations, and be able to translate that when we go to our clients or to our companies, to our businesses, to deploy them. The reason I said all this is because the use cases are very unique to the needs of the company. It's not about what Gen AI can do only. It's about what your company values as of business processes that will make use of generative AI and enhance or any part of the process, right? So it's not that the Gen AI will replace a process and will make money for you, right? It's what are the processes, what are the areas of your company in which you could leverage what a LLM or a VLLM, which is the one with multimodal or vision capabilities, what those models can do that fits well with one of your processes or parts of your processes to automate that process or to augment that process, so then you can achieve your business goals faster or with less cost, or with more quality, right? So these are the three aspects of it. So giving a use case is tough, right? And now I can share some examples of that I worked on, but I will pause here so we can continue.
Absolutely. Actually, it would be great to get to knowing some more use cases. But I think it makes a lot of sense what you're saying, that we should approach LLMs as another component in our technology landscape, right? We should understand the limitations. We should understand, where it can provide value, and depending on the particular company needs, then implement accordingly. Specifically because I think automating a process as such might be a bit complicated. What I'm trying to say is just with AI, with Gen AI, right?
Okay.
Because it can hallucinate, or that translates to making mistakes. And in the end, I guess some of the ideal processes that we want to automate wouldn't rely necessarily in a deterministic answer, like a specific answer that
Exactly.
is a yes or no, right? Um, and then it would need some human supervision if that was the case. So it makes a lot of sense to me what you're saying, and yeah, I'll be more than eager to knowing more about the use cases that you know that you have implemented and how they worked out. So let's dive
Yeah, we
deeper in
can go
there.
into that. Yes,
Yeah,
so
amazing.
that's a great topic. I think one of the limitations you expose of these models
Mhm,
is the fact that they are not deterministic, right?
mhm,
Actually, any model is deterministic. All the models, deep learning models, they are non-deterministic, but they have a threshold which allows you to say, okay, from this up, I will consider an outcome that I will use to automate, right? Um, so
mhm,
the fact that they are not deterministic means that we have to ensure that we understand how to define when we should accept the outputs of these models, and how to enhance those outputs so then they mostly provide results that are above the threshold that we have provided. So ways to do that is through one way to do that is through in-context learning, or what we usually how we deploy it is usually called retrieval augmented generation, right? RAG. So
mhm,
everybody talks about RAG today, and the reason is because the models don't know everything, and so they need to have a domain specific knowledge to then provide outputs that are better and will go above the threshold that we need to be able to rely on their responses, right? So the retrieval
mhm,
augmented generation is one of the techniques, or I would say the most successful technique to deploy machine learning Gen AI models in enterprise. One example, one use case where we have used that, and in my opinion, worked very well was with one of the companies I worked for. We enhanced existing chatbot that was created to
mhm,
provide support to the procurement team. So the procurement team was responsible for is responsible for maintaining and control over the purchases, right, of our products. I worked for a CPG, so the CPG was managing um, resources, like companies that would provide the resources, so then we could create our products and sell to our customers. The procurement team is legally bound to many contracts. They have to ensure that they follow specific rules, and those rules are scattered in many documents around
mhm,
many data sources, and it's very time consuming for them to go through those documents or to train people to go through those documents and ensure that a specific requirement is met when they work with procurement. On the other side, there is the client, the oh my God, I forgot the word. The people that provide the resources, um,
mhm,
or people that we purchase from, right? They uh, they also have to have some sort of help from the procurement team to understand what they can do, what they cannot do, right? So those
mhm,
two groups, they were always in conflict because they needed a source of truth to go and perform a specific task. That's a that's a situation, a scenario common to many companies. Depending on the type of industry, it will be more important and less important. Gen AI was used to enhance this chatbot in two ways. One was to make the communication between the resourcer, or the company providing the resources, and the procurement team, this communication with the chatbot easier and a little more with more quality, right? Less than choose three options, go to the next, and then less robotic and more um, more interesting to go through, right? And to allow them to ask questions and provide more information that was relevant to solve their problems. Another, or in other words, making the user experiences better, right? This was the Gen AI
Mm-hmm.
usage. The other one was using retrieval augmented generation to allow for the chatbot to retrieve the relevant documents for the specific topic that was in discussion, and then provide the results with a quick summary, a summary and relationship between different documents that would provide the answer, because sometimes the answer is among different documents as well, and providing this answer in a way that is easier to follow, quick to understand, and has access to the sources, so you can go and check details, etc. In order for us to get this content very well performed, there were a lot of work. There was a lot of work to understand how the data is presented, how we should perform all the transformation necessary, chunking, all the buzzwords that we use, right, for making the
Mm-hmm.
data ready to be searchable quickly, then choosing if we are going to do semantic or vector search or hybrid search, and then making sure that the search works and the top documents are relevant to a specific question. So all this has to be done with a very uh, it needs to be very carefully crafted and done by a good amount of people. And I'm going to another question that because we one question I get a lot is, what
Mm-hmm.
you worry the most when um or misconceptions, right? So what are misconceptions
Mm-hmm.
that people have? So one of the misconceptions is that it's easy and quick to deploy generative AI because you go to ChatGPT and it's easy. I can create a agent, assistant pretty quick. I can create a prompt that provides a profile, and the assistant will understand what is their task, and they will help me, right? The thing is that if you start using it frequently, you will notice that there are limitations to the answers that are given, and those
Mm-hmm.
limitations, once you are familiarized with the topic and you are one of the experts and you need the assistant to help you, you realize the limitation. And those limitations can
Mm-hmm.
only be solved by in-context learning, right? Or by
Mm-hmm.
enlarging the context window and stuffing more, fine-tuning and
Mm-hmm.
retraining. But that's another level of discussion, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's an example. I
Definitely.
hope I answered your question.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. And I also wanted to share this particular example. Let me just share my screen real quick. And I want to come here because this person has a famous podcast, right? And he also has
Hmm.
like a blog and all of that. And then since he is really into technology, some of his contacts, propose that they can create a chatbot to talk about the content precisely in the podcast, right?
That's a good
But
idea.
something, yeah. And then something that really caught my attention is that lately they added a different way to interact with it. So how it works is that you can come in here, type your question, and work like that. But you can also click here and then make a call, basically, right?
Mm.
And that means this they train it so this person, or rather this entity, maybe we can call it, actually sounds like a person and interacts as the person might do it, right? So I thought about bringing that up because in the end, it depicts the use case that we were talking about, right? Where you have some content and then the chatbot can retrieve the specific pieces that might be relevant and then present the answer. But I also
Exactly.
wanted to highlight and wanted to ask, what about these new ways of composing AI, right? And how is that changing the way in which consumers also, interact with it? Do you think that in the future the interfaces would be more like this, more like conversational, more like using voice? And what other types of media do you foresee that will be there when we are interacting with our products in our services?
So that's a wonderful question. A great example here, because that's exactly what I believe it's going to happen soon with our clients, right? So it's our businesses. The one of the objectives of the use case I shared with you guys was to enhance the experience of the people interacting with the chatbot, right? Not only pulling the data that is relevant for the work to be performed, but how you do that, right? How you interact with an interface that will understand you quickly, and will make the necessary follow-up questions to get the information that is required from you to be able to then give you an assertive answer. This can be delivered through text, but it can also deliver through voice, as you were showing. And those multimodal models, they are now showing that they can provide this channel of connection, or this channel of relationship or interaction that is not only through text, but is also through voice and through video, right? So we are going to see that I would say in the next year for sure, because the new ones, I think we got Sora a few weeks ago, right? And then there are other models that are popping up that are related to video generation, and I think this is going to happen now. This is great for businesses, I think, in my opinion, right? Because at the end of the day, we are all humans, and we will want to have human-like communication when we have to deal
Yes.
with problems, or we want to engage more with the brands. Anything we want to do, we want to have the right way to communicate with us. One of my backgrounds is also in project management. I had I worked as a project manager, IT project manager for 5 years, and I had my PMP as well. So one of the 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 major topics in PMP is how you address communication with your stakeholders, right? And the communication is so key that, if you work everything well, communication will get into the way and either delay your project or impact quality or etc. So the topic of making sure that communication is in the right size, in the right uh, is the right fit for the audience that you are working with is key. And so being able to have Gen AI providing different channels of communication that are very similar to human-like is amazing. The downside is you get deep fakes in the form of video,
Mhm.
deep fakes in the form of audio, and text, right? So deep fakes is a concern, and we haven't discussed about ethical topics, but what I wanna say is, in simple words, is those ethical concerns are valid. They have to be considered. Everyone deploying solutions needs to know what the ethical topics are, because then you understand and can identify whenever you are delivering something that might impact people negatively. And this is very important. It's not in the way of
Correct.
progress. It's just that it's responsible. It's being responsible, right? As we want our kids to be responsible, right? It's the same way. It's being understanding the downsides of what you do and make sure that you can mitigate or reduce the impact as much as possible. And this has to do also with replacement of jobs. It's gonna happen for sure with specific types of projects. Now, I hope that the builders which are focusing on the future, they don't focus on replacement, but they focus on enhancing jobs, right? And that the people that are delivering like us, that we are using it, that we look at it as an assistant and not as a way to make more money by replacing people, because it's far from replacing people, honestly, in my opinion. It's far. Like the more you learn, the more you use,
Mhm.
the more you understand that there are flaws and limitations. and those limitations can impact your business in a way that will be seriously seen later, right? So you need to be careful.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now that you were,
Go
sorry.
ahead, Gary.
Yeah, okay. So you are talking about ethical considerations, and that was my question. Like, how can companies balance innovation with ethical considerations? Because I have seen like I guess my real question is there some sort of entity or something that can prevent things like that to happen? Because I have seen use cases like randomly online that, I don't know, want to build an AI that can understand your feelings, your emotions, and work as a sort of therapist type of thing. So at the end, how ethical is that? Is there an entity that can say, no, this is going beyond of what AI should do? Or I don't know, making some sort of awareness to the audience or users that this might be a tool that can help you, but it's not recommended as your, I don't know, psychologist or something like that.
Perfect. There are, yeah, so I will broke down into two parts. I always do that, by the two parts. One is the entities, right? You mentioned about the entities. There are entities that should be, first, let's go the other way and then I go to the entities. First, let's establish the foundation. Ethical concerns, what they mean, right? And I have my notes here on the side because even I myself being exposed to that frequently, I still forget some of the topics that are relevant inside ethics. And so it's very important for us to have that handy and understand well what those topics are. So the first one is misinformation and deepfake. So we discussed about deepfake, and we discussed about the fact that they are not deterministic, and therefore they might produce misinformation, right? And so this needs to be something that we have to understand whenever we deploy in a specific use case. Each use case will have distinct ways to produce misinformation and deepfake. So that's why it's so difficult to say, in general, look for X, Y, and Z. No, we have to understand that they will produce deepfake and they will produce misinformation. And therefore, in this use case, how is the way that this will be presented to you in your example as a assistant, like a coach or a therapist, right? What are the situations where a model could produce misinformation that would affect the person that is relying on it, right? So you have as a business, you have to disclose that to everyone that is using, so then they are aware that if they use it, they know how this will manifest. So that's one example. Another one, bias and discrimination. So these models are probably being fine-tuned or are using retrieval augmented generation somehow uh, to use specific data to perform the action of being an assistant or being a therapist. Is this data reliable? Where is this data coming from? Disclose the data. You have to disclose where you come. You don't need to show the data. It doesn't need to be open source, but you need to disclose how the data was presented to you, what you did with the data, how you are ensuring that the data is used is, and all the biases. Because one of the things that we always discuss is bias in data. Some people say that you can mitigate bias. No, you cannot. The data sets always will have bias. So what you have to do is disclose those biases. So you know what are the limitations to where your chatbot can go. I'll give a simple example. Let's say that um, this therapist, Gen AI therapist, was trained in US data, right? So US data. So what we are talking about here is that we are going to speak with a Gen AI US therapist. So this already gives us an idea of what are the biases that we might face when we interact with that. So disclosing this will allow us to choose, right? One way to do that is to choose which ones to use. Another one, intellectual property. They will generate content. How we ensure that the generation of this content is not coming from sources that have intellectual property rights, right? Is it creating new content, or is it stating or quoting parts of information that was copyrighted, that has rights around it that you shouldn't be using? So this is another one. Data privacy. So making sure that those agents, they know how to handle data that is private to you. So in the case of the therapist, I'm sure it will rely on a lot of private data that you are going to share with the assistant. And so this assistant has to ensure, and this goes beyond Gen AI, right? The whole solution has to ensure that this data is properly maintained, secured, and more important, that the Gen AI will not leak that to another user when performing this, the conversation, right? Because I could try to pursue the Gen AI tool to pull data that it was exposed to before, and it might provide me Gabriella's information in different ways. So this is another big topic that needs to be addressed. And then the last one is transparency and accountability that you mentioned. So being able to transparently show where the data is coming from, how the data was generated, when they provide you with tips or suggestions, where the data is coming from, how was it generated. And it's you can go in a long list of like transparency things. We are almost out of time, but organizations, right? We have to help the so there are a few ones. One is the government itself has to be on top of it, and they have to ensure that they listen to the experts in the topic, so then those can provide inputs on how those regulations should be created, because those regulations, they have to have some balance, right? They should not prevent us to progress, but they also have to ensure that once we start progressing, that the impact that we see is mitigated. There are roles that will be replaced. So how we can make sure that those people are either there for longer, or they can learn to go one step above, so then we have less and less people being impacted when those jobs are replaced. If we don't have a control, then we are going to replace people quickly, right? Again, I'm out of time, but we can always discuss that later. You guys can follow me on LinkedIn as well, because I share a lot of stuff of that on that matter.
Definitely. Yes. So yeah, we definitely ran out of time. I had a couple of questions in mind. So as closing comments, what would you say to someone that wants to follow this Gen AI path or career? Like, what are the things that helped you understand and move forward and have a career in this field?
I like always to mention the foundation. So that's why in the beginning I spoke about how those models were trained. Go for the foundation, deep learning. Understand what deep learning means, how it was created, and you don't need to go into much. It's just to understand the framework that allows those models to know what they know, right? Deep learning is the foundation. Then understand what makes foundational models different from other deep learning models, because that's what makes the Gen AI what is Gen AI. The way it was trained is different. The task that was trained is different. The architecture used is different sometimes. So you have to know those things to then start using it with other eyes. So then you understand limitations, you understand how good those models are, because you have to benchmark them, right? Each model was trained with different data sets. They behave differently, and it's very difficult to benchmark them. There are already scores that allow you to know more about it. And the last one is to use. The more you use, I'm sure everybody here uses it. You know, we did a survey in one of in the company I work for. I think 95% of the people were using already. So it's a lot. So we most probably here we all use it frequently. So use more frequently, test it, see how far you can go with specific tasks. So you will understand how this, and prompt engineering is a great way to understand how to tweak it to do outputs that you want, and to basically get an overview of how this works, and be able to then guide others on that. If you are more technical, LangChain, Llama Index, great way to start.
Great. Thank you so much, Luca. Well, inviting everyone to follow Lucas Lima on LinkedIn. As he said, he shares a lot of information about Gen AI. Luca, so let's see if we can have you back in a few months with maybe more trends on Gen AI. If you are up to that, we'll keep in touch. Thank you so much for your participation, for wanting to join this event. It's we really appreciate it. Edgar, any closing comments on your side?
Just, Gabby, that as you mentioned, right? I think that there are a lot of things still there to discuss. I appreciated, Lucas, that you were here with us today, and looking forward to having the opportunity to do this again, because there's so much to discuss, and it's been so interesting. So thank you so much.
Oh, I'm glad that you guys enjoyed. I enjoyed, and thank you very much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. Have a wonderful holiday and
You
the
too.
rest of it.
Yeah, you
Thank you
too,
so
and
much.
everyone here.
Likewise.
We are back next Thursday with another Tech Social. So that's the last one for this year. So I hope I see you all here next week. Thanks again. Thank you, Lucas. Thank you, Edgar. Have a good one, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thank you.